Wherever you are around the world watching us online or here in person at Silverstone, let's get ready to rumble with Historic Formula 2. The March 782, the definitive Formula 2 car of the late 70s, is very much at the front. Andrew Smith, Matthew Watts, both similarly mounted on the front row of the grid ahead of the Martini, the French-built car Ben Mitchell with David Shaw in his March. Tim De Silva, third in the Formula Junior race, now lines up in fifth place in his Chevron for the Formula 2 race. Ahead of Graham Ridgway, Clive and Martin Wood, Mark Hazel and Mark Mercer. Now we have 27 cars in our field and a whole host of different eras. And already one failure to proceed, and that is very unfortunate. That is car number 3, Tim De Silva's B35 Chevron. So Tim De Silva, having just had that little misfire on his car, running into third place in the Formula Junior race and jumping out of one car into another, unfortunately failing to proceed. So he drops out on the formation lap. Andrew Smith on pole position. The 1978 March, 1982 March, March 782, 1978 March, the Formula 2 car, March 782. I was going in the right direction in the first place with the 2-litre BMW engine, was very much the car to beat in period and remains so as well. Powerful, great grip, great handling, and Andrew Smith and Matthew Watts both with a 782 on the front of the grid. David Shaw qualified fourth in his March 782. They've all got a variety of the familiar white, red, blue and purple BMW M Sport livery. But in third place, the blue car of Ben Mitchell, car number 21, with the very French-looking livery on it. A good reason for that, the Martini chassis built in France. Very successful in France, in racing, particularly on the continent, into European Formula 2, but a little less often seen on British shores. Chevron also were very successful. B35 of Tim De Silva's pulled off, but car number 30, Clive Wood, he's now the best Chevron on the grid. His B29, that car, B28 rather, car again with a 2-litre engine. But there are two different classes here: 2-litre Formula 2 cars and the older cars with fewer wings and aero add-ons, the earlier 1600cc category. Well, the cars forming up and getting ready for the rolling start here. Race 2 at Silverstone about to get underway. Historic Formula 2 at Silverstone. The rolling start is go, go, go. Andrew Smith in the March 782 with the predominantly red, blue and purple livery. He's the leader from Matthew Watts in a similar car but with much more white. And Ben Mitchell from third on the grid goes with them in the Martini. But the lead trio looked like they were aware of what was happening. Some of our races have a lap and a half a formation lap, but the safety car pulled off after just half a formation lap here, so they are racing, but the lead trio have broken away. And Alistair Douglas, a little bit of a shoulder shrug perhaps from some of the others, going, what happened there? But there's a dive inside for the lead. Matthew Watts into Brooklands, right in front of the BRDC suite, got his nose inside, couldn't hold it around the outside, so the leader is still Andrew Smith.
Bigger cars than the Formula Juniors, still plenty of room here on the Silverstone Grand Prix circuit, and you could see them side by side there through Luffield. But it's Andy Smith in the car that was driven, all these cars actually driven in period by top drivers, and they've all been brought back and they look wonderful, don't they? They're beautifully prepared as they come up through Maggotts into Beckett's, the sweepers, and we'll really see the ground, not the ground effects because they're not allowed that, but the aerodynamics of the cars, pushing the cars down into the road as Andy Smith clips the curb on the inside there onto the hanger straight for the first time. And in fact, he's just slightly broken away from our second placed car of Matthew Watts, and Ben Mitchell, as you say, in third place in the Martini, which the first two cars, Marches, the third one a Martini, and those three have really broken away already from our fourth place car, which is David Shaw in a similar March 782.
Yeah, so David Shaw in fourth place in the yellow March. Right behind him in fifth place, Graham Ridgway. beg your pardon, he is in the yellow march. He's Graham Ridgway in a slightly older march, 1974 version. So that's the bright yellow car in 5th place. And in 6th spot is, well, now says it's Tim De Silva. I thought we saw Tim De Silva pulling off. If it's car number 3, it is him, but the leaders starting to pull away. And again, on the first flying lap, a fastest race lap for Andrew Smith. So he's adding a little bit of extra ground between himself and the chasing pack. And it is breaking down a little bit. Matthew Watts in 2nd, Ben Mitchell with him in 3rd. Or has there been a change? No, Ben Mitchell still in 3rd place. The bright sunshine reflecting off these cars, making it a little hard to spot. Now there's one of the earlier cars. That's a Brabham with the familiar blue and yellow livery. And those cars, the older cars, the 1600cc cars, that was still the time when, as we see a change for 2nd place, Ben Mitchell moves up into 2nd, into Luffield. And so the leader, Andrew Smith, coming across past the pits, past the old start-finish line. Ben Mitchell up into 2nd, and Matthew Watts in 3rd. By the stage that these cars were racing in the late 1970s, it was very rare then, Alistair, to see Grand Prix drivers in a Formula 2 field. In the 60s and into the early 70s, they still were mixing with the young stars, but this was really a dedicated category for young emerging talents, the Eddie Cheevers, the Mark Suras and so on, Nelson Piquets of this world, who came through Formula 2 and were vaulted into Formula 1. It was very much, as it is now in modern Formula 1, a proving ground, a shop window for the young talent to show that they had what it took.
Absolutely, yes, and although we saw drivers jump straight from Formula 3 into Formula 1, Formula 2 was the normal stepping stone to hone their craft, and we saw Ben Mitchell going through there into 2nd place in the Martini, but he's the meat in the sandwich now of the 2 marches. But Andy Smith is starting to pull away in the 782, driven in period by Mark Surer, and that car returned to the racetracks just a little earlier this season here at Silverstone. Its first time out after a major rebuild, and a wonderful job that the team have done on it. They've even gone as far as looking for colour photographs of the car in period so they could match the stickers precisely to how they were when Mark Surer drove it in 78.
I think that's all part of this, and you'll see this in quite a lot of the races here at the Classic and every other historic meeting. If you buy a racing car and it had a famous driver in period, or it had one era, because of course these were then raced second-hand by other impecunious enthusiasts and perhaps in national club racing and what have you, Interserie or Monoposto, run what you run type races. If it had a stellar period, then that's the period you want your car to represent. So all of the owners will put that kind of effort into making sure that it looks right. Part of it is driving the cars, the sheer pleasure of driving these cars with their big wings, their fat slicks, and that super responsive Mercedes, beg your pardon, BMW 4-cylinder 2-litre engine. But the other part of it is showing the cars as they were at their best, and part of that is the way they look, and part of that is the way they're being raced by these drivers.
Yeah, indeed, in some of the categories we'll see today, it's actually part of the regulation that you present the car in its period livery. It may have had a number, of course, then team cars had different sponsors, privateers ran them, but pick one that you like, please bring that along, because we want to see the cars as they were in period. And wonderful to see, and so much effort goes in to preparing these cars. And we're looking there at some of the mid-pack. That was Keith White we saw in a March 76B, which is a former Atlantic car with a 1600 engine. But back to our leader of Andy Smith in the ex-Eddie Cheever cars. He turns in to Village and up to the loop, the tight left-hander. So important to get this one right, because this leads on to the very fast Wellington Straight, through Aintree, down onto the Wellington Straight, which was the club straight in the old days, and many times these cars would have been driven perhaps on the club circuit, but now it goes left at the bottom into Brooklands rather than right through Woodcote. There's Ben Mitchell now. I wonder whether he's catching a little. The gap between them last time around was just under 3 seconds, and Ben's lap time very marginally slower than the leader Andy Smith. So Andy looks to be still pulling away from the Martini. a French car from Manicourt, built by Tico Martini, nothing to do with the drinks brand.
At least not in his day job. Andy Smith, the race leader, just with another fractionally faster lap, fastest race lap, 1 minute 58 now. Only he and Ben Mitchell in second place are under the 2 minute mark. So everybody else lapping 2 minutes, 2 minute 1, but these two up to 2 seconds a lap faster than the rest of the field, and that's why it's become very much a two-horse race. Now you can see the leader coming up to the first of our lapped cars. In fact, that's the second car that they passed. That's Oliver Uez in his March 722. And again, 6 years of development between two cars built just up the road from here in Bicester in Oxfordshire, and you can see how different cars became through the 70s. 1970, just seeing the start of aerodynamic wings being added on, little nose fins and little rear wings, and by the mid-70s, although Formula 2 wasn't allowed ground effect was in full force, so these cars with the enormous shovel noses and the big rear wings, and the March concern, March, Lola, particularly very, very active in building cars for customers. They were production racing car manufacturers, and March in Bicester, one of the most numerous and most successful. They produced cars for just about every category. And of course, in the late 1960s, when the team was founded, they also ran Formula 1 cars.
And somebody that's just appeared on our timing screen didn't have time to say when we were doing the grid rundown. Matt Wrigley started right at the back, didn't do a time in qualifying due to a technical issue. Matt Wrigley, number 78. You'll see him on your timing screen in 7th place. He is a very quick driver, also in a similar car, the March 782, so we'll be looking for him perhaps appearing with the lead battle very shortly. Perhaps not catching Andy Smith and Ben Mitchell, because they seem to have this race under control at the moment.
And again, the leader going by one of the older 1600cc Brabhams, so these cars are all racing in 4 different categories, age and engine size dependent. And there is the Martini in second place. To all intents and purposes, looking very similar in... no, beg your pardon, there's Matthew Wrigley in his March 782. I was going to say, looks very similar to the Martini. But there it is, his March 782. 5 cars starting from the pit lane as well after technical infringements in qualifying. So there was all sorts going on. A few laps were disallowed for track limits after qualifying in various different sessions yesterday. And Jesus may save, but he's not keeping you going. And that car rolling to a halt. Now, I should, off the top of my head, remember exactly who drove that car in period. It's a very famous livery, and I can't remember who on earth it was.
Ribeiro.
Oh, was it? Okay, Andre Ribeiro. I was thinking Hector Rabat, but I didn't want to go there. I didn't want to go there, no.
Another retirement there, unfortunately. But Andy Smith certainly going well. This car has been, as I say, rebuilt very recently, finished earlier this season, and it's been very reliable for him. And he comes down into Brooklands, and you can see the car moving around. It may look as though it's absolutely stuck to the track, but Andy is absolutely on the limit in this car, sliding it around, just drifting the car on the throttle, a little bit of steering input. Probably in these cars with the big wide slick tyres, it's better to keep the car really tidy rather than sliding it around. But he's right on the limit, as we see a very young driver, teenager, Sam Harrison, I'm afraid, seemed to have a problem, but he's got going again, Martin.
Well, again, a little bit like Cam Jackson in the Formula Junior race earlier. Arm out of the cockpit, the universal sign he's got an issue, and I wonder whether Sam Harrison, like Cam Jackson, possibly had a gear selector problem, couldn't get a gear, and then managed to get it back into gear and kept going again. Looks like the teenager in his 1971 Lola is back up to speed, nowhere near the speed of the leaders. Last lap round, though, the leader dropped down into the 2 minutes. 2 minute 1.2. His fastest lap is a 1:57.7. So that's 2.5 seconds slower than he'd gone previously. He lost a little bit of ground to Ben Mitchell in second place. But in third place now, Matthew Watts, who started on the outside of the front row of the grid, is over 6 seconds back. This is the battle for 7th place. 7th, but 8th and 9th, yeah. So ahead is the white car, that's Martin Wood, this is Clive Wood, and car number 30. And behind him is the man who started right behind him on the grid, car number 14, Mark Mercer. Mark Mercer in a Ralt RT1. Ralt became very much a dominant force in Formula 2 in the 1980s. The Ralt Hondas, run by Ron Toranak, won the championship a number of years in succession with drivers like Roberto Moreno, with Mike Thatwell, Jonathan Palmer, and the Ralt's RT3 then, that was the RT2, the RT3 then, Ron Toranak's Formula 3 car, became for, well, the better part of a decade, the car to beat. Drivers like Martin Brundle, Ayrton Senna and so many others cut their teeth. Johnny Herbert, Johnny Dumfries, I mean just about everybody in the 1980s who raced in Formula 3 will have used one of Ron Toranak's chassis. The Aussie designer came over with Jack Brabham, designed Brabham's early cars and then set up on his own. Another great livery here on this car, Phil Hall, 1975 March. He's in 10th place. The gold and the Warsteiner beer livery, and of course that was very much prevalent on German run and German entered cars, and it still is to this day. So he is up in 10th place. And again here you can see some of the older cars with the less obvious aerodynamic wings, or the smaller aerodynamic wings, as teams and designers were finding their way in the newfangled world of downforce. Smaller tabs, smaller canards, higher rear wings. This is after the debacle of the super high rear wings that were mounted, if that's the right word, and it probably isn't, on the rear suspension. But here comes our leader, Andy Smith, cutting his way through the slower cars, and not just because they are less modern, but also because 1600 cc's doesn't propel you quite as quickly in a straight line, whether you've got wings or not, as 2 litres. So 3 or 4 different classes in this race, and Andy Smith in Class D. The fastest and newest of the lot is our race leader, Ben Mitchell, chopping away a little bit in traffic. The gap's now gone out from 1 point something to 3.6 seconds. And in 3rd place, Matt Watts is still 6 seconds further back, so 9 seconds behind the leader. So though he's now in traffic and not lapping quite as quickly, last time round, Andrew Smith, a 1:58, so not quite as quick as his best lap, but that's about his 2nd or 3rd fastest lap, and that is in traffic as well. And we talked about this in the Formula Junior race, Alistair. Part of the racecraft is dealing with traffic, being able to see where they're going to go and to know where the gaps are going to open up before you arrive there. And that is born of experience. Absolutely it is, yes, and just the knowledge of obviously the track, but also how you can position your car, and it's quicker to slow perhaps on a straight so that you come out of a corner a little bit quicker and pass the car there, rather than go through the corner behind the car and you may be held up and then you're slower onto the next straight. So it is about reading what's going on ahead, and there's a great deal of trust between the drivers that they won't move across the track at the last minute. And we see there Andy Smith working his way through 2 cars through the Stowe Corner section into Club Corner now, and through the double right-handed section which leads out onto the Hamilton Straight to complete another lap with just over 4 minutes remaining in this race. Up towards Abbey he comes, and you can see in the background there the 2nd placed car of the Martini of Ben Mitchell. Then it's Matthew Watts in 3rd place, and David Shaw in 4th. I'm hesitating a little, I think, because we might have lost Matt Wrigley, and I do think, Martin, I owe him an apology, because we call that the commentator's curse, don't we? Matt Wrigley has come up as missing on our timing screen, and I was just looking for how well he was doing. He was doing very well. There's Mark Mercer, car number 14 in the Ralt RT1. Mark Mercer behind Mark Wood, so that's the battle for 6th place. Mark Wood in car number 94, the March 782. Just ahead of the red machine. There it is again, with all of those BMW Motorsport. And trouble for the leader. The leader was very quick through traffic. He built a big margin, but he's got a gear selection problem. You can see the head of the driver bumping around Andrew Smith. It all looked to be made and ready to be delivered, but Andrew Smith is struggling to find gears. You can see the car jerking as he found a gear, but I think now that's it. The gearbox, all the selector rods are packed up, and he comes very slowly into the pit lane. And that is the end of the race. So suddenly Martini and Ben Mitchell are out front, and out front by a big margin. Ben Mitchell was still 6 seconds ahead of the car in third place. So Ben Mitchell leads. The engine is running on the march as it comes in, but it actually sounds rougher than a rough thing. Now, as it trickles under our commentary box, obviously it's very much off cam and out of its power band, but it does not sound crisp. So I wonder if he's lost a cylinder. Our new leader then, pour la gloire de la France, it's Martini and Ben Mitchell. Wow, with 1 lap remaining, the leader rolled out onto the Wellington Straight, and immediately it was clear that he had a problem. Now, the way he's weaving a little bit, fuel pickup, really? They don't fill the tank, they don't brim the tank. It's a 20-minute race. They will have put in enough and a little bit and maybe just a smidgen for luck, but you don't brim the tank. But did he have a fuel issue, or was it something else? Not sure that we're going to find out before we leave this. However, in the final minute, is this going to be the last lap? There's another car pulled off. They're all starting to fall by the wayside. Graham Ridgway's marked 7:42, but here is our race leader, Ben Mitchell. Now, does he know that he's the race leader? Did he recognise that it was Andrew Smith? Because slow marches as you're at speed going around a tight corner probably look much the same. He may have looked in the mirrors and thought, is that him? He may have just come past the pits and seen P1 on his lap board, but whatever, the clock is running out. As he gets to the wing, the checkered flag will be waiting for him. It's going to be close, but I think this is the last lap. 25 seconds to get down the hanger straight through the Vale. Might be close, there might be one more to go. Ben Mitchell from third on the grid leads. Matthew Watts from second on the grid is in second place. And in third place from fourth on the grid, Daniel Shaw. So our top 4 qualifiers were all in the top 4. And mechanical carnage has done for Andrew Smith. 2 seconds to go, 1 second to go. It's another lap. Checkered flag was not out. That was very close indeed. Now, can you imagine if that had happened in our Formula Junior race when we had a wheel-to-wheel drag race for the line? Wow, that's impressive stuff. So 1 more to go for Ben Mitchell, and there is a clear road ahead of him. Second place, Matthew Watts, and that is a big advantage that Ben Mitchell has. He can be very cautious if he needs to. He is 9 seconds ahead of the second place car. And in third place, it's a further 13 seconds back for David Shaw. So Ben Mitchell almost looking like he's on a test session on his own. And there is the second place car, Matthew Watts. Again, a March 782, again, factory BMW livery. A very different look to it, though.
And that one driven by Mark Surer in period. So, yeah, absolutely very much a factory car. As we watch Ben Mitchell, who's come up for his family. Westy Mitchell, his father, will be racing in a later race this weekend. Ben, the older son, and Sam, the younger son, they're all very quick racing drivers, and it's great to see. I still call him young Ben, but he's a little bit older now, but I've been watching him for so many years, and it's great to see the skill of the Mitchell family in a proper Formula 2 car, rather than the earlier cars that they sometimes race. So down they come, he comes towards Stowe Corner on this final lap.
8th place is car number 29, the yellow Chevron B29 of Chris Horrett. Now, he is one of our class leaders as well. He is leading in Class B. And Class C race leader is car number 47, and that is a green and orange march. That's Keith White. But the overall race leader and Ben Mitchell, the race winner, takes the checkered flag here at Silverstone. If he'd eased off by a second, it would have been a lap ago, but he didn't know that. Ben Mitchell, the winner in a Martini. In second place, the second best qualifier, Matthew Watts, in his March 782. And in third place, the man who started in fourth on the grid, David Shaw, in another March 782. There should have been 2 marches on the podium with victory for Andrew Smith, but mechanically he did not get there. There is David Shaw's white car. And a little further back will be our next class winner, who will be in 8th place. And that again, car number 29, Chris Porritt, in the yellow Chevron B29. But there on the right-hand side, your race winner. So Ben Mitchell qualified in 3rd place, a 58.8 compared to a 1 minute 55.5 for poleman Andrew Smith. And Smith certainly had the pace to win this race, just did not have the mechanical constitution in the car to survive that pace. And very disappointing for him, I'm sure. So the rest of our field stream across the line. And there were, how many? 14 cars on the lead lap at the end of that 20-minute encounter. So Chris Porritt, there he is, the yellow car. That is our second class winner. 2 of 4 class winners. The winner in Class B he was. Class C went to car number 47, Keith White, in his green and orange 1976 March. And the smallest engine capacity class, Class A, that was won by car number 82, Mike Bainbridge, in a 1971 Brabham. That's the blue car with the yellow fins, 1600cc car. So those are the 4 class winners. But the big story, undoubtedly, the failure of Andrew Smith's car 2 laps from home, 3 laps from home, as it turned out to be, within 5 minutes of the flag. Well, there is car 47, Graham Ridgway, March 742 again. That's a proper Scale Electrics car shape, isn't it, for gentlemen of a certain vintage? Again, so many of these cars being run in liveries in which they would have raced in period by perhaps their first or their most significant or well-known owner. But in the pit lane underneath the podium, we will receive winner Ben Mitchell, second placed Matthew Watts, and third placed David Shaw. So we'll also have mini podiums also for our different class winners. But for the podium that we will see here, that will be the top 3. So victory for Martini. It was a Mark 19 updated to 22. So a 1977 chassis originally for Ben Mitchell. And that white and blue Martini. Just 1 Martini in the field. And in fact, one of only 2 French-built cars. The other one was the Motul M1, run by the Rondell team in period. Ron Dennis's first independent outfit after he left Jack Brabham's team. And that was the car number 70 of David Tomlin, which started from the pit lane. So just 2 French-built chassis, and everything else coming, apart from the Techno, from the UK. Ben Mitchell then, Martini, ahead of the March 782s of Matthew Watts and David Shaw. Mark Mercer finishing 4th in the Rolt. And although Ron Toranaka's an Australian, they're all built here, so I think we probably own Rolt, don't we? But morally. We consider it to be a British march like Chevron, who fill out the rest of the top 10. And then there's David Tomlin in the Motul, again started from the pit lane. That car was quick in qualifying, and he came right through a huge field to finish in 13th place. I bet he had a race and a half. Not the race that was hoped for though for Andrew Smith, shown 3 laps back in 26th position, Tim De Silva didn't start, or didn't get to the start, and a couple of other cars fell by the wayside early on. But yeah, the big drama, the comfortable race leader Andrew Smith was in the hunt right from the start from pole position. Early attack from Matthew Watts came to naught, and it was the man who was in third place early on, Ben Mitchell, who kept a watching brief in the first couple of laps. And then, when it all went wrong, after Andrew Smith had opened up his lead further and further in traffic, looking made in the shade as others had problems, including young Sam Harrison in his Lola. Battles for class honours continued throughout the field, but the overall victory looked certain. Andrew Smith was going to win it in his March BMW until suddenly he wasn't. 3 laps from home, his car packed up, and victory fell into the safe hands of Ben Mitchell. He claimed the win in the first of our historic Formula 2 races in his Martini.